Hello. Let's start in the United States of America with the basis of most everything, employment, and an interesting chart plotting job destruction and job creation. Very important in America. There's an awful lot of churn. There's always been a lot of churn in jobs in the United States of America. And job destruction, part of that churn, is the red spotty one that really doesn't trend anywhere. This chart goes back to 1983 and it's coming in and going out at exactly the same number, and although it's been up and down between those 30 years, really the trend is nowhere. It's pretty flat in job destruction, but the trouble comes in with the green line. Since the spike up in 1983 there, top left, there's a definite trend towards bottom right. And that is the problem. Job destruction is about flat, but job creation has tended downwards for the last 30 years, with an obvious acceleration in the last decade. It will take something monumental to turn that around. Right, let's see what Washington is up to, because they can do monumental, can't they? They can build monuments to themselves anyway. The real abortion battle isn't on the Hill, it's in the states. Right-ho. The House is set to vote today on the Protect Life Act, a bill that would bar women from using health reform laws' insurance subsidies to buy plans that cover abortion. But today's vote is also a bit of a distraction. It will likely pass the House, but is pretty much dead on arrival in the Senate. If you really want to know what the future of insurance coverage for abortion looks like, you should keep an eye on the states. Many are taking aggressive steps to vastly restrict private insurance coverage for abortions. Seems to be a priority over there. Weird. Tax Policy Blog gives us new state online tax bill introduced in Congress. Yesterday we reported on what might be a new online sales tax bill being introduced into Congress. The bill is reportedly called the Marketplace Equity Act, another classic. And the key points are there. Naughty online people, must tax them. Well, they need the revenue, don't they? Of course, so that must be wise. New York Times, the opinion pages, hits in with no jobs bill and no ideas. It was all predicted, but the unanimous decision by the Senate Republicans on Tuesday to filibuster and thus kill President Obama's jobs bill was still a breathtaking act of economic vandalism. There are 14 million people out of work, wages are falling, poverty is rising, and a second recession may be blowing in, but not a single Republican would even allow a debate on a sound plan to cut middle-class taxes and increase public works spending. They'd vote on abortion. Anyway, the link between the United States and Europe comes via this chart, which is so complicated I don't understand it. Because it's all about these core tier 1 capital adjusted rates, etc., for bank stress tests and laying down capital requirements that I talked of yesterday and will talk about more, I hope. And these are the leverage amounts for US banks and European banks. US banks on the left, mainly light blue, and the European banks on the right, mainly dark blue. Less leverage in Europe than in the United States on this particular criteria. KeyCorp and Fifth Third are the most leveraged on this criteria, and if you want to know, that dark blue European one in among the Americans is RBS, UK bank, partly owned by the UK government. This article by Neil Hume in yesterday's Financial Times Alphaville, called "Taking the Stress Test to 9", was confusing. It seems what they've done. I was talking about these capital requirements and whether they should put them up to 70%, but really they're talking about something around 6 or 7%. But they seem to be coming out with a number that's 9%, which is very, very big indeed, and would cause banks an awful lot of trouble, and would look very impressive if they got round to doing it. But it looks like, if you read this article, they have tampered with the inner criteria of the criteria of the criteria, and we get, I'll just take this one little couple of lines out just to give us an idea. Still, Britain's banks won't complain about these tamperings of the criteria. Criteriums? I don't know. If the test is constructed in the way we have outlined, they should all also pass, even RBS, which was the highly leveraged one stuck in the middle of the American ones there, because we're on European capital requirements here. So it looks like what they're doing is going for an impressive looking headline 9%, but then letting them away lightly on the inside, which is the important stuff, which is very complicated. This next link, Reuters put together this interactive chart that people like me might enjoy going and having a play with. Top left there, you can use that slider to set the core tier 1 capital ratio to wherever you like. You can haircut Greece, Portugal, Spain, Italy and Ireland, and below will be a readout. Those blue bars go up and down and roundabout, and you get which banks particularly would be in trouble on their capital ratios. And RBS, I can't get it not to be on the top, because it always seems to be far above everybody else. But below, the usual suspects are Deutsche Bank, UniCredit, SocGen, Barclays, BNP, Commerzbank, etc. People like me might like to follow the link and go and have a play. ECB monthly bulletin for October. They push these things out every month. This is about 250 PDF pages long, and it is tremendously boring. But I've dragged this out. This is among paragraphs which all sound pretty much like this, but this is the paragraph that I've pulled out, which is a representative of the ones around it. First, PSI can be expected to have direct negative effects on the banking sector across the euro area. PSI? Pounds per square inch? Remember? Private sector involvement. While private sector involvement is certain to place significant stress on the solvency of banks and other private financial institutions in the country concerned, it will also have an impact on the balance sheets of banks in other euro area countries through cross-border sovereign bond holdings, cross-shareholdings, funding or branch channels. This could trigger a need for large-scale bank recapitalization. Those would be the capital requirements again. And all the paragraphs around this one are and as well as all stressing that they don't want private sector involvement, which kind of is summed up with this in the end. Against this background, the ECB has strongly advised against all concepts that are not purely voluntary or that have elements of compulsion, and has called for the avoidance of any credit events and selective default or defaults. This is classic. All euro area governments need to demonstrate their inflexible determination to fully honour their own individual sovereign signature, which is a decisive element in ensuring financial stability in the euro area as a whole. In other words, as long as nobody defaults, I reckon we can get away with this one. What they're saying here, though, is when we go to these final meetings at the end of the month to definitively sort out the Eurozone and their problems. The ECB is very much against Greece defaulting, which will be a problem because everyone's basing everything on Greece defaulting. Martin Wolf, Financial Times, talking about the United Kingdom. He sorted out Europe by telling the ECB that it must print up huge quantities of money and give it to everybody so everybody's happy. So he's got actually a similar sort of line for the United Kingdom as well. How should the United Kingdom escape from a slump that seems sure to be longer and more costly than the Great Depression of the 30s? And he goes on about Cameron and the Conservatives and how they're thinking that austerity is the way to go. And he finishes with this paragraph. First, which is sensible, fiscal and monetary policy converge when interest rates are close to zero. The authorities have to cooperate closely to prevent an unnecessary disaster. The thing there is unnecessary disaster, but I think we can agree that central bank, treasury and government have to cooperate, but I'm sure they do, even when things aren't going to shit. Second, and his big point, without economic growth, it is almost impossible to deleverage an economy. The Prime Minister revels in his pre-Keynesian views. When weak demand is the immediate constraint on output, that is simply terrifying. You got it? He says Keynesianism is good. What we need is huge government deficits, and because the problem, he does mean huge government deficits, backed up by central bank printing, so that the people can deleverage and still spend money into the economy at the same time, so there can also be growth. And I'm sure he's right. But in the long run, before we're all dead, will he be all right as well? Or would that sort of action blow up an economy such as the UK's? It's up to the boys at number 10 and 11 Downing Street to decide. And it's going to be a crucial decision because the UK economy is actually on the line. What to do? Bye.